To me, this is not just another nation. It is not just one of the family of nations. This is a nation with a great mission to perform for the benefit of liberty-loving people everywhere.
That we shall be as a city upon a hill.
These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country.
You've come to fight as free men. Free men you are. What will you do without freedom?
Proclaim liberty throughout all the land.
In one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. You gotta fight for your right. Can you dig it?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Real News 901 on this morning time on July 14th. My name is Mr. Henry David Shine Thompson. Sitting over there to my left, going to be flying in like a ninja this morning. We also have our buddy Zig back from the PA way on the Tuesday mornings. Going to be introducing him in just a second. Look, man, I got the unified chat going over here. I'm going to see where you're coming from with your comments. Comments, be it on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Mixer, as long as that's still a thing, I believe. Doesn't matter where you're going to be commenting from or where you're watching this from. We will make sure to interact with your comments. Part of the reason, if not the sole reason, why we do this program is to grow this community, not just so we can have views or anything else, because we want genuine interaction with the rest of y'all to build this community, to shape it with each other so that when we have disagreements, it's amongst friends and not amongst enemies. How's everybody doing this morning? Let me kick it over to my boy Shine. Introduce him. He'll introduce Zig. We'll get this thing started right this morning. Shine, buddy. How you doing this morning over in East Tennessee way?
The only thing that could make it better, my friend, is if I had more coffee. But despite I only get 1 cup this morning. Despite only having 1 cup of coffee that I'm like just nursing to like just get every last beautiful drop, it's pretty good. I'm very excited about the prospects of today and of this week. So having a great time here in East Tennessee. Good morning, Zig. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing all right, buddy. I was in the same situation as you, except instead of 1 cup, I only had 1 pot. Okay, so I'm right there in need of more coffee, like always, to get these thoughts going with our real friends on Real News.
Hey, let's dive right into these headlines right now then. First, let me start with this. We got some new folks jumping in Facebook here. Again, realnewsradio.live, realnewsradio.live. That's the central landing page for all things real news related. You're going to be able to find YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, all the links right there. Greatest Audience in the Nation Appreciation segment. Greatest Audience in the Nation Appreciation segment. Let me know how you're doing, what you're struggling with, what you need help with, what your prayer concerns are, what your encouragement is, what your praises are, any of that type of stuff, man. If you need a hot meal prepared, let us know. We'll have someone in your local community put it on the front doorstep, that type of stuff. You know what I mean? We'll supercharge the community to get the word out. Let's go ahead and dive into the first headline for this morning, though, because this is something that I don't know how much time you want to spend on this, honestly. And let me say before we start this story here, because what Shine and I do with Real News here, and Zig also works for the same company of Americans for Prosperity in our actual real time. We do this in our personal time, though. And I know we say that fairly often. I just need to have that hard line of delineation, make it abundantly clear. Then we'll cover some of these stories here, such as this next story with Tennessean headline. Moments after Governor Lee signed it, courts halt Tennessee's restrictive abortion law. I need people to know that some of these issues AFP doesn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Like, we don't do it. We don't touch Second Amendment stuff. We don't touch abortion stuff. We don't touch socially charged issues at all. In some sense, because there's a bunch of other, companies that are already covering it type thing. So hard line of delineation, that's why we say that, is that, we work for a company, but this is us on our own time so we can cover stories like this for y'all. Now, with that being said, there are plenty of things that you can get involved with AFP. We're having a meeting tonight. I will have major updates on tomorrow morning's program specifically pertaining to this property tax increase going on in Nashville. We have a massive push right now going on for a petition it's a referendum issue. I'm going to get it on the ballot, stop the property tax increase, along with a bunch of other things. We've been going over that before. 4goodgovernment.com, number 4goodgovernment.com. Tomorrow morning's program, I'll lay an entire list, though, of all kinds of ways you can get involved in the Middle Tennessee area. And suffice to say, we basically have something almost every single day that people can do. So again, back up real quick. The reason why we let people know that this is our personal time is because AFP doesn't touch a lot of the issues we cover on this program. Here's the headline again. Moments after Governor Lee signed it, courts halt Tennessee's restrictive abortion law. Now, this is not surprising. This shouldn't be surprising. This is exactly what people predicted. A federal judge halted the rollout of the controversial abortion law in Tennessee less than an hour after Governor Lee signed it into law. Less than an hour after Governor Lee signed it into law, the bill was halted. Now, Lee on Monday signed a state's wide-ranging abortion law into law, legislation that will enact some of the nation's most restrictive abortion regulations. Okay, yeah, that's technically true on its face. If it were to have passed and actually enacted into law, then it would have been some of the most restrictive abortion laws and regulations in the nation. But you can say that, Tennessean, because every other one that's been signed into law before has been immediately stalled, just like this one. So it's not exactly being fair, because there is several other states that have attempted to pass something the exact same way, if not almost the exact same language, heartbeat and all. I think Nebraska was one of the most recent ones in 2015. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. Now, meaning Governor Lee, signed the bill around 11 a.m., and by 11:45, the court had already ruled against it. Now, you might think, like, well, how did that happen so quickly? Well, I mean, come on, you know how it happened, man. Like, they had this thing set up, whoever they is. There was something set up in the court system literally as soon as it passed, and that's what the next paragraph says. Reproductive providers, including Planned Parenthood, along with American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, another abortion rights group, filed a lawsuit against the bill in federal court in Nashville in June after the bill passed the Senate with a 23-5 vote, or early morning vote. Abortion providers asked that the restraining order, an attempt to delay implementation of the ban while the case is going before the courts. Now, this entire thing, both sides knew from the very beginning that this is exactly how this is going to play out. And to be totally real about this is part of the reason why I came on here the morning after this bill passed and told y'all that there's not a single pro-life organization in the state that supported that piece of legislation. Part of the reason why they didn't support that piece of legislation is because if I'm breaking it down to like the most simplistic version of what the legal context behind this is, it's essentially the argument goes like this. If this is inevitably bound to fail in the court system, why don't we swing for the fences? Why don't you just swing for all of it, man? Like literally put something out there that, I don't know, maybe it's an argumentation that's never been heard of before. Maybe it's something that's going on the 9th Amendment, the 14th Amendment. Maybe it's something that will actually be guaranteed to get up to the Supreme Court. Maybe we could guarantee to create a controversy amongst the states so that we can push it. If you're going to waste taxpayer dollars, you may as well waste it for something that's a worthy cause of fighting for, because it's highly unlikely that the bill as it currently stands is going to stick around. That was at least, as far as I know and as far as I researched, the legislators that did not support this, at least on the conservative-leaning side, and in the organizations that didn't support this, the pro-life organizations that didn't support it, that was their argumentation, was it doesn't do enough to put the power back in the hands of Tennesseans to make this decision for ourselves. When you break it down, that's what most of these organizations are pushing for. They're pushing for, look, man, at an absolute minimum, can we get this out of the hands of the federal government? Can we have some 10th Amendment policy back in here? And can we pull this back to the states? Now, I have some notes in there too, but I didn't want to spend much time on that. I just want to give you guys an update that it was a thing of like, look, this is out there, it's happening. Expect this to go through the court systems. Everybody knew this was going to happen. It's not a major controversy, and it's not nearly as much of a controversy as the Tennessean or somebody else makes it out to be. This is exactly the game plan as everybody saw it laying out. As soon as this thing passed, this is exactly what everybody knew was going to happen. Now, pause me here real quick, Sean, if you or Zig have any comments you want to throw on that before I get to the next story here. I do want to quickly gloss over some of this story here, man. As far as what we do on Real News, man, I don't know how many people lean Christian. Frankly speaking, sometimes I don't necessarily care. But if you just believe in vibes or general good feelings, whatever you believe in here, man, this next story real quick coming from the Tennessee Star, one of our own state representatives, Representative Kent Calfee, he announced yesterday on Facebook that both him and his wife, or is it he and his wife, I don't know, whatever one is grammatically correct there, have both tested positive for coronavirus. So, look, man, whatever, if you believe in prayer, if you believe in good vibes, I don't know, whatever you believe in, man, send them Representative Calfee's way. The guy's 71 years old. I presume his wife's somewhere around that similar age as well. All right, now I don't want to focus too much on this, man. I just want to bring the attention as one of our own here in Tennessee, one of our own representatives, guy that works hard for his constituents. I just want to make sure that we're bringing attention to something like that, man, because I don't know, man. I just be safe out there is what I'm saying to people right now. Just be safe out there as you're interacting with people. Take the proper precautions. Do right by your fellow man, that type of stuff, man. And pray for Representative Calfee's family there. You know what I mean? His wife came down with it first. He then ended up coming down with the second. Now, at the time of this reporting, he had not been experiencing any symptoms yet. So, we're obviously praying for the best outcome there. And then finally, the local stuff before I bring my boy Zig on here for the next the headline here that we're really brought him on for this morning. Just a quick update of some of the numbers. You'll see yesterday was one of the highest breaking days for Tennessee of 3,300 new cases. And I don't know, man, you got to keep all this stuff in context as far as I'm concerned. Yes, it was the highest breaking day, but we've also tested more than 1 million people at this point. Now, what's the actual number? 1,053,424 tests. And out of those tests, 988,150 have been negative results, which in the entirety span of this lifetime of this thing, that puts us at, what is this here? Confirmed positive cases at 36,996. So anyways, y'all, all I'm saying is just be careful out there. Be safe. Whatever you got to do.
36,000 out of 1 million, though, is that's pretty good, right? All things considered. Yeah. I mean, it's like 0.0003, something like that. 4 zeros point. I don't know. I'm really bad at math and statistics, but I think it's 0.0003% that means have tested positive, which is pretty good considering that they told us it was like airborne and like the worst thing ever. I think we're doing all right. Yeah, man. People should look at glass half full, but we definitely should pray for Representative Calfee and his family.
Yeah. And obviously, man, part of the reason me bringing that up is just it's easier for people to personalize when we can tag up something people might have met before or known before or something like that. But really, in general, I brought that just to let people know, like, look, man, this thing is still going on. Pray for anybody that's been infected by this or affected by this as well. All right. Pray for anybody that's had a touch on this at all in the state and the nation. I mean, this is something that should be coalescing people together. That's part of what transitioned into this next national story. When this whole thing started, Shine, like you and I were going over Wall Street Journal headlines about like the coronavirus revitalization, the coronavirus reawakening, right? Like there was like a resurgence, like a spiritual resurgence, and people like gluing together, like stuck with one another. Like, we'll fight through this, man. Nothing can defeat us type thing. Like that's what this virus was when it first started. When it very first started, there was a lot of fear behind that. Don't get me wrong. I understand that. But when this thing very first started, the notion that I got from most people was like, man, this is tough. We're going to have to bind together and get through this, man. We're going to have to support our fellow man like we never have before. I guess the only real appeal I'm making right now is there is so much. Everything has been so politicized. Dude, all of this trash is just falling dead square on top of an election year, man. And I'm pretty sure that has a large part to do with what's happening right now as far as the divisive nature of everything that's going on right now. I guess I'm just making one final appeal again to like, dude, just bind back with each other again. Bind back with each other again. Support with each other again, because there is a pressing moment coming. I do believe, man, there is a pressing moment coming where, I don't know, it's going to get tough for some people. But going forward here, this is where I'm bringing Zig in real quick. All right, so Zig, let me bring everyone up to date here. We teased this story yesterday, and for my libertarian friends out there in particular, I don't want to lean too much of my own bias to this story at the forefront, and possibly even at all, because I'm still kind of trying to make heads or tails of this entire thing. The libertarians, man, it's an interesting thing they're going through. We're all going through something interesting. I just said it. That's why the transition works so well. You'll see in the show notes they're asking, are libertarians too woke for their own good, or are they making a sincere appeal to human dignity? Now, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, July 10th or maybe July 11th, last Friday, presidential candidate Joe Jorgensen tweeted out the following, and China pulled that up so you can see it on your screen right now. She tweeted out the following that said, quote, "Is it enough?" Sorry, I can't. She said this: "It is not enough to be passively not racist. We must be actively anti-racist with hashtag Black Lives Matter and hashtag Vote Gold." One more time. It is not enough to be passively not racist. We must be actively anti-racist. Now, I don't know, man. Maybe for any other party stuck in the duopoly, this would not have been, it would have been, fairly anodyne. Okay? Hey, there's that word, love. Yeah, I told you. I was going to figure it out. I don't even know if the
I'm
word
sorry. I'm sorry, judges. Yeah, we're going to need you to define that for the audience. Can you define anodyne? Use it in a sentence, please.
Look, it didn't really seem like it was going to do it. It shouldn't have been all that controversial on its face in the grand scheme of things. But for libertarians, man, and I will give them credit for this, man. they will push an argument to the extent of just like squeezing it for every possible worth left to really figure out what they believe on a subject. And I do have to commend them for that. But sort of the aftermath that fell out of this statement right here, man. And I don't, maybe it was the tagging of the Black Lives Matter, but it was also the language that she used. It was the anti-racist, the word itself, anti-racist along with actively anti-racist. And it just threw the entire Libertarian Party into this like whirlwind, man, of just like, I don't know if it was half-half split. I couldn't give you an accurate sort of statistical breakdown of who was for and who was against this. But she was hit with all kinds of responses, man, of like, why are you, everything ranging as you would expect, right? Some showing support. Some were drawing, the attention to BLM's institutional framework of Marxism that doesn't exactly fit well within libertarian circles. Additionally, some were remarking on, well, read the next following, or bring up the next following tweet there, Shine. You'll see the one by Michael Malice. And then again, I've not studied who this Michael Malice guy is. I don't pretend to understand who he is. He claims to be an anarcho-capitalist, I guess. I don't necessarily care. This was just an interesting retort.
He's been on Joe Rogan, though. He's like a guy. He's a thinker or whatever. He's out in there in the world. He's an influencer of thought.
Gotcha.
So he's not a nobody. He's been on Joe Rogan, I think, twice.
This is what he said. He said, as a libertarian candidate for president, he was responding to Joe Jorgensen's initial tweet. He said, as a libertarian candidate for president, do you support the repeal of say that word, Shine. Discrimination.
Yeah.
Discrimination laws. I don't know why I couldn't say that. Anti-discrimination laws. As a libertarian candidate for president, do you support the repeal of anti-discrimination laws? Which libertarians do. The point this guy was making was, hang on, man. This whole thought line doesn't necessarily fit well within what libertarians believe. And if you don't have to take my word for it, that next photo down, Shine, if you want to see that, the photo there linked, it looks like it's just like the next photo there on the screen. It says photos.google, whatever. The next hyperlink down there shows this is section 3.5 under rights and discrimination, essentially saying this is the Libertarian Party platform, essentially saying, you see the highlighted section, members of private organizations retain their rights to set whatever standards of associations they deem appropriate, and individuals are free to respond with ostracism, boycotts, and other free market solutions. Now, what the libertarian stance, the party platform says, and right before that, it says government should neither deny nor abridge any individual's human right based upon sex, wealth, ethnicity, creed, age, national origin, personal habits, political preference, or sexual orientation. So they make this hard line. They say government can't do it, shouldn't discriminate. Individuals, you can do whatever you want. Like, I mean, literally, you can do whatever you want, man. You have a business, you can discriminate against whoever you want. So the point that this Michael Malice guy is drawing is basically saying that, like, under the Libertarian Party platform, we support repealing anti-discrimination laws, which is to say, putting it in a positive context, which is to say, libertarians in general support the right to discriminate. And it just doesn't jive well. It doesn't fit to feel well.
Now, hold on. Let's be fair to libertarians. It's a negative right, not a positive right. They don't believe in the right to discriminate. They do not believe in government's ability to stop people from doing anything with their property. So it's a negative right. They don't believe that you have the right to discriminate. They just don't believe anyone should stop you from doing anything with your property.
Valid.
Okay, because libertarians are about negative rights, not you cannot infringe on X, Y, or Z. Not you have to do X, Y, or Z.
That's a good point. Sure.
And that was a lot of the philosophical responses you saw to Joe Jorgensen. It was like when she said we must be anti-racist, libertarians like we don't must be anything. We don't have to be anything in order to have rights. In order for anyone to have rights. Like when I do something, it doesn't give anyone else rights. They have those rights. They shall not be infringed. This is our mindset. Get what I'm saying? There's a lot, even just the way. I just wanted to. I'd hate to paint libertarians as people who believe in the right to discriminate. That's not what it's about. It's about that you have the right to do whatever you want with your property, and that includes being mean to other people for various reasons.
Freedom of association, correct?
Yeah.
Right to discriminate. That's right to discriminate is what detractors use to paint freedom of association as a fundamentally absurd idea, right?
So where are you coming down in this, Zig? All right, and this is what I'm saying. Like everything that I presented so far, I mean, everything that you've been seeing, everything from Michael Malice's response tweet to the photograph. That photograph was actually just something that I grabbed off of another tweet response to this, man. Where are you following this entire thing? Do you think this is just like a, because Joe Jorgensen eventually followed up with something I'll mention here in just a second. But as far as it stands with the Libertarian Party, man, like, I don't know. I personally think she was trying to make a sincere appeal to just basic human dignity, to show, because what she says is like, look, man, we're all fighting for the same issues here. For what the BLM movement is openly espousing, that they are wanting to, say, repeal civil asset forfeiture, get rid of no-knock warrants, that they're wanting to do away with some type of, qualified immunity or something. This is something libertarians have also been fighting for a very long time. So how are we not on the same page as all this stuff? I think that was the general notion she was going with. And I don't know, man, maybe it was just this thing that the libertarians were trying to be too ideologically pure or something that got everybody mixed up. But I'm also playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, because the Twitter responses I saw were the exact opposite of what I just presented. So I don't know, man, where are you coming from, Zig?
Well, I think that there are different angles that this could actually be viewed from. If she made this statement to be provocative in order to gain votes and actually transition people from a certain platform about anti-racism to a discussion about what libertarians believe can combat racism, then that could in fact be a prudent political move. You come out with something that grabs attention, and then you pivot to something that actually is more ideologically aligned with what you're doing. So after further thought, it could be a good move, but it all depends on how she would go about playing this, and if libertarians themselves are clever enough to make the right play on this.
It's interesting, man. Here's her follow-up, by the way, after sort of several hours of going back and forth. I think she tweeted the original one around 12, and then this response tweet came out around 5. And I have to be completely honest with how I feel about this response tweet. I don't think this response tweet did much to help soften, say, the original, the way that people originally took the tweet, the first tweet. It was just convoluted. It was confusing. Here's what she tweeted back, saying hashtag Black Lives Matter means standing in solidarity with a mourning Black community as we fight together to end qualified immunity, police brutality, sentencing disparities, and the war on drugs, not support of any, quote, organization by that name. The Libertarian Party, actually the national account of the Libertarian Party, responded back with the exact same thing. Also issued a response saying, quote, as a reminder to many, there is indeed a nonprofit organization called Black Lives Matter that espouses itself as Marxist. There is also a nationwide movement of millions seeking policing and justice reform that goes by the same name. One matters far more than the other. Now, this is the argument that you've been seeing develop, and it's a confusing one for me to get around. It seems to be a convoluted distinction between, like, I don't know. And I'm genuinely asking this. I don't know, man.
This is marketing, Grant. I can tell you from someone who did advertising forever and have done advertising for people who felt like either their business or their name had been dragged through the mud in some kind of way accidentally. This is marketing. It's marketing to say, well, we don't support the organization. We just like the vibe of what's going on. Don't tie us to anyone's specific words. The only words that we want to be tied to is the phrase Black Lives Matter. But don't be going and reading what Black Lives Matter says. And even if you do, that's not what we mean. Well, then don't use the same words. The burden is on you to be above reproach, not us for not reproaching you. You know, that's the way it goes with humans. If you don't want people to think a certain way about you, that's on you. It's not on everybody else. Because only you can change the perception of you. Just from a fundamental, that's how humanity works. So, that was a lame excuse. It was a lame excuse, because if nobody had gotten mad, they would have never said that. They would have just taken all the praise and all the accolades. But I don't know, if anyone wants to go look at either one of those tweets, you can scroll as long as you want to, and you're going to see 90% negative response. In fact, both tweets were ratioed heavily. And I think a lot of that has to do with the things I said before, is it's not just like we're taking a position that we normally don't take. It was fundamental about, like, libertarians are for negative rights. Like, you cannot infringe on these rights. And she said we must be. And it is antithetical to libertarians to say that they must be anything. They are to be whatever they desire to be, and let the market reign, you know.
I think your follow-up tweet makes perfect sense because it's a good tactic. You start with this, you start with something controversial, and then pivot to something that actually supports part of the platform. The issue is that folks like her and individual followers like her are not clever enough to fully utilize and maximize the capabilities of that tactic. Okay, it's not a statement of belief, it's a tactic. Okay, it's like you bait them and then you pivot to whatever it is that you're trying to do. More people should actually try to do that if they can be clever enough, because that can propel them into national conversations.
It's not clever though, and it's not new either. It's called trolling. It's not like a new thing to throw out a controversial topic and then say, haha, that's not what I actually meant. I tricked you. That's like from like the, in fact, conservatives and libertarians use that tactic to perfection in 2014 and 15 and 16. And then we all started getting banned for it because you can't signal. They started saying even sardonically or sarcastically signaling to a controversial topic means you're tied to that topic. And I think the only reason she's able to get away with it is because it's Black Lives Matter. If it was some other kind of signaling to something that was outside the narrative, she would have gotten in trouble for it. And it's the reason that we don't do it anymore. It's like culturally we don't do it anymore. But like, I'm not going to let her win by doing that. I'm going to say, you know, she said that Black Lives Matter, and everyone had every reason to believe she was talking about the actual organization when the conversation right now is about the organization. They're making mad campaigns, the Black Lives Matter people and their allies, to show that talking about Black Lives Matter being Marxist is a conspiracy. They're pumping out that material right now. In fact, it's trickled through reality through friends and gotten to me, so it must be doing pretty well. And she was adding to that argument that, like, you can be talking about Black Lives Matter and not be talking about Marxism. And I think that's incorrect. By singling out a specific group, you're talking about Marxism, in my opinion.
But she did bring in an actual policy about qualified immunity. So here's what I'm suggesting. I don't think it's trolling to put out a statement that's similar to someone else and then show how you can draw a different conclusion about a policy that you support. That's not trolling. Trolling is saying something nasty and mean and then ridiculing people. What you can do is you can say something nice that people wouldn't expect, use that to gain attention, and then pivot that attention over to a positive issue like ending qualified immunity. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong or sinister about that, but I think the issue is that typically when I've heard this lady speak, she's overly straightforward and not charismatic or energetic or just clever enough in general. I think that's a core issue for me, is that libertarians can run generic candidates where they need to use more tact and tactics, such as this one, which I think is good.
See, and I just don't understand, frankly, the need for any of it. And here's what I mean, man. Like, libertarians and the Libertarian Party in particular is very uniquely situated when it comes to this exact issue. Now, in the sense of there is really not another organization, or at least with a profile party like this, that anybody could point to that could say, like, dude, you guys have remained consistent on this basically since day one. All right, now it's something that Americans for Prosperity has taken up for sure. We're kind of new to the game. Democrats have been flopping back and forth on this whole criminal justice reform for a very, very, very long time. I mean, goodness gracious, man. Joe Biden himself, the Democrat presidential candidate, is the guy that essentially authored the federal version of what we know to be civil asset forfeiture right now. Something that we're all trying to get rid of, or at least most of the Black Lives Matter movement is trying to get rid of right now. Republicans arguably been just about the other way. Libertarians and Libertarian Party is uniquely situated to kind of have always maintained, if you want to call it a moral high ground, we can, but at least a consistent ground on all of this criminal justice reform stuff. And it comes from what Shine said before and what you're articulating right now as well. I think you're both right in some sense of saying that, like, look, man, when they bring in conversations like standing in solidarity with the Black community as we fight together to end qualified immunity, police brutality, sentencing disparities, and war on drugs, not supporting anything that stands against that. I don't know why you couldn't just take, say, a Frederick Douglass approach to this and say, look, man, these are the things that we stand for. We've always stood for this. If you are a person, I don't care what you say outside of that. I don't care if you're a part of some group. I don't care if you're part of some whatever. I don't care what. If you are a person that supports these ideals, then we're with you. If you are a person that's against these ideals, then we are not with you. We will work with anybody to do right, and we will unite with no one to do wrong. Yes, it's trite, it's old, it's an adage right now as far as it pertains to this program. I get it. But I just don't necessarily see the need for libertarians, and I'm not going to go so far as to use the word pander, because I don't necessarily believe that's what this was. Necessarily. I can get feelings of that. I can get a scent or a sensation that that's what this is or became. But I think in general, man, I think it was just trying to make an appeal to the stuff that they've always stood for. But that's what I'm saying. It's like when you are the king, you don't need to tell anybody else that you are the king. When you've always stood for things like this, you don't need to prove that to anybody else. Your work should prove it for you. Your underlying philosophy should prove it for you. And then in the back end, the thing that's most confusing to me of all is like, we all just sort of like jumped some logical premise here. Like, so the syllogism is that like now the syllogism has become that Black Lives Matter, the organization, is not the movement. And I don't know where that missing B premise is. You get what I'm saying? Like I have A and I have the conclusion C, but we just jumped over when that conversation happened. I don't know when that happened. I don't know when that happened. And that's
the organization wasn't the ones putting the marches together.
I don't see.
You know what I mean? Like that's not a thing. Like they're just a charity, and this whole thing was completely organic. No, that's not real. That's fake news. That's not real. Remember when the blackout thing on Instagram happened and the Black Lives Matter organizers said, why would you use our hashtags when we're trying to organize nationwide marches? Blah, blah, like we played that on this show. Like they weren't the ones organizing the marches. And here's the other weird thing, Grant. I know I'm kind of sounding like a broken record. Is the only ethnocentric nationalist group that anyone can signal as a way to make another point is Black Lives Matter. If I were to signal to any other ethno-nationalist group, like, and like to get attention and say like, oh, like that German ethno-nationalist group from early in the last century, they had a good point about X, Y, or Z. Like, I can't do that, and I would never do that. But that's the same thing Joe Jorgensen just did. Like to go off of what Zig said, where she's just like making a bombastic point and then directing all the bombasticism to actual real points. I could not do that with another ethnic central nationalist group. I could not do that. But it's allowed to do it with Black Lives Matter. It's the neutering of how bad it is. And it's like saying it's okay.
I think in general, though, people put too much of an emphasis on logical consistency in politics. How often have you ever seen a logician run for Congress and win? There are plenty of logicians out there. Okay?
Never.
There are a bunch of them. In fact, if that's what people wanted, logicians would win. And they would run, and people would get special training in logic to win in Congress. But that never happens. That has never happened. There has never been a logician that has run for Congress and won, and it will never happen. So to always think that we need to look for logical consistency is a bit of a stretch. I think what politics largely is something more of like a sort of a contest of who can gain the most attention, who can wrestle the most critics. And that's what it is.
And I'll tell you, man, like as I'm wrapping up this story and moving to one of the next ones here. I think what's really letting me down about most of this is this is Brett. This issue of criminal justice reform, man, is one of my it's one of my near and dear issues, man. It's been near and dear to my heart since second year of law school. I think the first time I took a Concrum Pro class, constitutional criminal procedure, or even just a constitutional law course. I mean, I think the first time that it really hit me, you know, where to be completely frank, man, the American legal system is not designed necessarily, but has definitely worked itself out to be
if you have money to afford an attorney, then a lot of good stuff's going to happen to you. If you're going by way of a public defender, then a lot of bad stuff might be happening to you, right? And that's not, look, man, like it's because a public defender has umpteen cases that day alone. A lot of time these public defenders are literally pulling up case law on their smartphones before they walk into, and this isn't a knock against public defenders, man. That's how most people cut their teeth. That's how good attorneys understand how to do the practice. But they just don't have, there's no time. They have so many cases. There's no time, dude. They're pulling up cases on their smartphone before they walk in. They're just like, this is it, I think, man. Like this is our best shot.
Well, and actually, Grant, I want to jump in and make a point about what you said about came to be. So, for example, a lot of people say that there is systemic oppression. Well, no, because that implies intention. That implies that somebody is sitting behind the scenes, stroking their beard, saying, we're keeping these people down. That has never happened. The ordinary person is just trying to get by with the talents that they have. It's not systemic. It's just how things came to be.
Exactly, man. I think disparate effect you can't necessarily conflate with what you just said about discrimination. Right, the Supreme Court's been very clear in that as well. And when you look at some,
there are philosophers who argue that there is systemic oppression, and that implies intention, and people don't have that. People in the legal system don't have that intention. That's just how, based on cultural changes, things happen to be. There wasn't a grand scheme.
And Zig, that's what I'm talking about, man. The more that we focus this conversation on the conversation of the systemic racist portion, racism that's going behind all this stuff, the less and less we actually talk about changing any of those issues that could be affecting some type of racism. That could, I don't know, man. Like if you want to call it systemic racism or not, this is surface level stuff that like we're just getting stalled on. Like we're stuck up here. Nobody for a very long time, outside of a few tweets that like Justin Amash and Massey tweeted out there saying, but like, hey, let's change these laws. Like nobody's really seriously considering changing any of these laws, qualified immunity, sentencing disparities, ending the war on drugs, no-knock warrants. And we've had a few things here and there at some state levels, maybe pertaining to no-knock warrant stuff. But I mean, overall, man, like where's the civil asset forfeiture stuff? Where's the qualified immunity stuff? More than just baseline conversations, because we keep getting distracted with this divide and conquer nonsense, man.
And here's the deal. Because of what has been done with this ethnocentric nationalist group, there will be less conversations about criminal justice reform. And the only reforms that I've seen happen since June, when this all started, is Marxist reforms. I haven't seen any criminal justice reforms. All I've seen is things to make us look more, or prepare us to look more like a Marxist economy. I've not seen any actual criminal justice reform in any state, not of any note, not in any of these cities. People have done things like chokehold stuff and things like that. They've gotten rid of their police. There haven't been real reforms. And I would argue because of this movement, there will not be. There won't be. In fact, after this goes on a while and the fear of social reproach goes away, people are going to call for more police. People are going to call for harsher tactics if crime just keeps rising the way it is now. And I think, too, that this whole thing is going to make people more ethnically centric, which is bad for everyone. Start seeing people who don't look like you as the other, and that's terrible. That is not what we want. It's going to make the world a worse place. And more specifically, we're not going to have criminal justice reforms. The window that we had over the past 2 years, and some great reforms did get done over the past 2 years, but not nearly enough. Like Grant was said, surface level stuff is still what we're dealing with and not getting to the heart of the problem. But now we won't. Now we can't. I mean, you saw the federal government. They're not going to pass any criminal justice reform. Republicans threw one up, immediately got railroaded. Democrats are almost done with theirs. It will not pass the Senate or get signed by the president. In all these states where the worst disparities are, in these cities where the worst disparities are, it wouldn't even take legislation. It would just be action by the mayor. They haven't even done anything. And they won't either. And it's very sad. And it's why Jo Jorgensen, I'm so mad that she normalized them by normalized that group, normalized that message, normalized ethno-nationalism, normalized it by signaling to them and then trying to pull it back to libertarian ideas. because what she should have been doing was condemning that group and saying, if you want real change, if you want to see qualified immunity, then vote gold. That's what she should have done. But instead, she helped normalize the thing that is keeping the good things from happening, in my opinion. And that is not popular to say right now, but I don't care. It's true. It's true. It's 100% true. And it's true in the way I'm predicting it. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I really feel like the window is now closed like it closed in the early 90s. There was chances to do criminal justice reform. And then we really haven't had a shot since. Because that's the way things go in a representative republic. Certain issues come up, bubble up. And if they're too hot, we don't get anything. They need like a nice lukewarmness where there aren't those passions on either side stopping things from happening. And that's what we've had for the past 2 years, where there was a little bit of unity around criminal justice reform on the right and the left, but not enough to rile everybody up. Now everyone's all riled up, and I promise you that will mean no change. I'm sorry if I went on too long of a rant there, Grant.
No, I just want to make the last point that the term systemic is what stops so much change, because when you assume that people have the intention to hold down a whole group of people, you might naturally be inclined to seek revenge, and revenge will not lead to prudent policy. So that's part of the point that I'm trying to make with using this term systemic. Yes, perhaps racism does exist, but when you use the term systemic, it's too extreme for ordinary people to get behind whatever movement you're trying to lead.
Kelly said on Facebook, by the way, that all the reports that have been done so far, very few want the police to be defended or defunded, frankly. I mean, there are certainly people out there. She goes on to say, yep, exactly, David, 100%, and saying that she just wants the POTUS to be honest and all about freedom and prosperity for every person. And let me, Sean, if I can actually share this next video, I want Zig to be able to see this next video. Let me, and then Sean, as soon as I'm done, take the sound sharing back for me so we can hear the outro music at the end, man. But let me just play this for Zig and everybody else to kind of prove Shine's point from a second ago. I think, unfortunately, this video that I'm about to play is what this entire conversation has devolved into. I like this video right here, and then I have a bit of a not a theory, but just something I want to say about this. This video happened yesterday. This was filmed yesterday in New York City. This is right out front of Trump Tower. Now, there's a big, massive Black Lives Matter. I think on 5 different streets in New York City somewhere, there's a big Black Lives Matter signs out there. And I do think that instead of talking about legitimate change and the way this whole thing started with, and this is also like tied in with the COVID conversation that we started the program with as well. I know it sounds weird to say that, but I do believe it is, man. When the COVID conversation started, we were on the same page with each other. Let's defeat this thing, man. Let's bind with our fellow human. And then it got politicized, and now all of a sudden people are fighting each other in the streets because of masks. I mean, there's another video in the show notes about a guy getting accosted in the middle of Walmart by 2 Karens on either side of him, filming him at the same time, just like berating this guy, verbally berating this guy for not wearing a mask. Now, whether you believe it's a good thing or a bad thing, whatever. I mean, we have disagreements on this program all the time about whether the mask is. My wife and I have disagreements about whether a mask is a good thing or not. She's giving me that look right now. I love it. But look, man, this is what I think this entire conversation has devolved into. Instead of unifying with each other, we have this stuff. And I'll explain here in a second. Just watch the video. Yesterday, right outside Trump Towers. Now, this let me make one point, and then I'll tell you how I actually feel about that video. But the initial point that I want to make with a video like that is that, as Zig says, or Zach said in YouTube here, she said she wasn't supporting the organization, she was supporting the movement. They're not the same.
This is what I'm saying. The conversation that we're now forced to have about whether we're talking about the organization or we're talking about the movement, is the movement somehow different than the organization? They're both using the same names. It's becoming confusing for people. It's like supporting Nike but not Nike. Like it's a tough conversation for people to get their head around. Right? It's difficult for people to properly parse. I don't know what the organization means, what the movement means, because the movement, why do you have to call it the same thing as the organization? Can't you just coin a new term, or can't you just say what you're standing for, or can't you just march for rights in general? Can't you just march as libertarians? It's a weird thing.
The movement was started by the organization. The movement was not organic.
But this is what I'm saying, though, Shine, is that like all of this stuff for me, all of it is totally missing the point, because it devolves into that video that I just showed. It all becomes some rando out in Trump Tower, on the front of Trump's tower, just throwing a single can of red paint on a Black Lives Matter sign across the street. Like, that's what this conversation has become. We've become so regressive in all of it. Like, no, not are we nowhere close. Not only are we nowhere close to talking about qualified immunity or civil asset forfeiture reform or any of that, we are so far away from it that this is the massive breaking headline stuff. The massive breaking headline stuff is some rando, just some idiot out there throwing paint on a street, man. That's our conversation spectrum now. It is. And here's how I really feel, by the way. See, I get so inundated with this media stuff. Shine and I and Zig, we put the show together, we do this stuff where we're constantly going over headlines. Zig actually has his own event up in Pennsylvania on Monday nights as well. There's this community forum, open style conversation. His stuff is much more high level philosophical than ours is. but they still get into some decent politics, man. And I watched that video, and dude, I'm not gonna lie, the initial thing that hit me is like, what? How did that dude just like so happen to show up in just like this beautifully picturesque panning moment from the left? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying it's staged necessarily. It was just very, very oddly coincidental that there was this sort of, I don't know, stage sort of pan off to the left, and then like, what? It just so happens to show up here. And then the guy just like meanders along, just like casually saunters away and turns it into a jog. Where I don't know, bro. I don't know. It just seemed a little bit too convenient, I suppose, that literally the entirety of all was just caught at the exact right moment. But whatever. I'm also a major cynic, and the media has done this to me. Maybe I'm wrong in this, man. Maybe I'm wrong in the entire thing. And maybe I'm wrong in the entire thing that, like, what we should be talking about is change and not the distinction between the movement and the organization. Frankly speaking, maybe I'm wrong in that. Like, I'm so confused. Here's me being totally vulnerable right now, and I'll kick it to Zig and kick it to Shine afterwards here. I am so genuinely confused in all of this stuff right now, and I'm willing to admit that after devoting a large portion of my life, all of my adult life at this point, to politics and specifically to this issue. I am confused right now. I don't know what should be priority. I don't know what should be reigning supreme. I don't know what should be talking about first. The only thing I can ever really fall back on is my Christian faith. And frankly speaking, that is becoming a common reference point for other Americans or other people in the world. It's becoming less and less every single day. I am feeling gradually more isolated in all of these conversations, and I'm assuming that everyone is feeling the exact same way. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the crux of this entire conversation. Maybe that's the epicenter. Maybe that's what we need to focus on. All of it is not the isolation, but the fact that we are all becoming collectively isolated, which is a strange oxymoron, right? That we're all becoming collectively isolated together, which shouldn't, well, you can't become collectively isolated together. Right, exactly. So if that's the case, why don't we all just wake up and recognize there might be some divide and conquer strategy going on here, man? Because I'm pretty sure everybody in their own particular way is feeling isolated from loved ones. Isolated from people that watch this program, isolated from comments that come up from time to time, isolated, then it doesn't matter. I just know I'm vulnerable enough and open enough to admit that that's exactly where I am right now. I don't know how to make sense of a video. I don't know how to make sense of a tweet from a presidential candidate from a party that I would frankly love to be a part of. I just don't think they'd have me. Let me kick it to Zig, though, man. And honestly, I kind of put you on the spot here. But, dude, respond with anything you want to. Anything I just wanted to rant about or anything you think we need to have the conversation, go for it. I don't wherever you want to take it, man.
I think the core of the issue is when you have a centralized media, then, of course, people are going to be divided. They're going to be for the centralized media or against it. And factually speaking, I do think we have a centralized media or something very close to that. Then the media attention and focus starts with the president and then sort of trickles down. And when you have that, that is obviously going to collectively isolate people. And I think more people would benefit to realize that it's conversations like the one that we're having that are the ones that really matter, because we're not here to divide anybody. We're not running for president. Okay, we are individuals doing this for free because we care about people. That's what should matter much more than what I would say is a centralized media. And I don't think that centralized media came up intentionally, but it is in fact what we do have. We have a centralized media, and anybody who's for liberty should oppose centralized media and the media monarchy that the president creates or has created historically for about 100 years.
Sean, I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit too, man. I don't know, bro. Where are you standing with all this?
Well, I think that video you showed, and maybe I'm a little biased towards myself, I think it shows that what I was saying is 100% true. Instead of like being able to have conversations about the things we agree upon when it comes to the realm or space of criminal justice reform, it's not even arguments anymore. It's stupid LARPing. It's either LARPing and painting a sign or building a statue, or LARPing and destroying the statue or defacing a sign.
Yeah.
Instead of, well, this is what I think qualified immunity, this would be the best thing. Or maybe we all agree upon qualified immunity and we're parsing out the various aspects of it, like how much should be retained, how much should be given up. These are the conversations we should probably be having. But instead, people are LARPing. And here's the deal. If you don't know anything about politics, when issues become so divisive that people are out LARPing about it, which is what they do in lieu of violence, by the way. So we're only like a few steps away from like open violence about the topic. Politicians don't touch it. If you don't know anything about the way laws get made, the laws get made about things that people aren't super excited about, because the lawmakers like passing things under the radar and then bragging about how much good they did. They don't like fighting every step of the way, tooth and nail through committee, every step of the way, tooth and nail through the vote, and then maybe not getting elected because of the vote they took. They don't like doing those things unless it's something they are very, very hardcore about. So, to the comment of organization versus the movement, both have poisoned the well for criminal justice reform conversations for many years to come, in my opinion. And whenever I look, and man, we got to get away as a society from choosing the word over deed. Everybody is choosing the words Black Lives Matter, but not looking at the deeds that it produces or the fruit that it creates. The fruit that is coming from either the organization or the movement. Pick your poison. And I say that no pun intended. Pick your poison. Both have poisoned the well for future criminal justice reforms. They have divided us, like you've said, where it's not just like community versus community or street versus street. It's neighbor versus neighbor, friend versus friend, family members versus family members. This is the fruit. This is the fruit. And those are the deeds. But we're all focused on the words. Oh, they say all the right things. They signal the right things. Not what's actually the results. And I'm sitting here thinking like, man, am I the only one who sees this stuff? Am I taking crazy pills? You know?
No, I hear you.
You know, like, and it's so uncomfortable because everyone wants to say I'm for the thing the group is into. Because golly, we're human and we love being like the group and we don't want to be outcast from the group. Everybody, and I want to, right? I want to be accepted by the group. It's a pull that's within me. But hopefully a stronger pull is the pull of truth. And it's like these are very uncomfortable truths. But you've said even before, Grant, if anything is going to challenge us, let it not be revenge. Let it not be anger. Let it be the truth that challenges us. And I know that it's a prediction. It's not really fair for me to call it the truth. But this will play out. My prediction is for at least the next 2 years, we will not see any criminal justice reforms of any note in any state, in any city, or the federal government. And in fact, we've seen the regression of such. We've seen, as far as actual legislation that's been passed, in California, they struck the civil rights language out of their constitution so they could legalize segregation. Did you know that? I'm not talking to you, the host. I'm talking to you, the audience, or you may be watching a year from now, and maybe we can talk about this tomorrow, Grant. California, they didn't replace it with anything. Just the straight-up language that's in the 1964 Civil Rights Act about not discriminating based on class, race, color, or creed that was in the California Constitution has been struck out. And that is a direct result of Black Lives Matter movement or the organization or whatever you're trying to do to save face with the group right now. Whatever you're saying in order to feel like you're a part of the group, whether it's the organization or the movement. The fruits of this have been entirely negative and the total opposite of the words that they use. The total opposite. And as I've said, you won't see any criminal justice reforms. You will see Marxist reforms. And if you're not condemning this for what it is, which is an ethnocentric nationalist movement, which is very similar to the ethnocentric nationalist movement that we sent millions of boys and women over to die to fight against, or the ethnocentric movement out of Japan, which was like, we don't talk about that being an ethnocentric nationalist movement very often, but it was. The Japanese were trying to take over because they thought they were better than everybody else. The Germans were trying to take over because they thought they were better than everybody else. And it was centered around their ethnicity. That is we've seen it play out. We've seen these things grow from seed to tree, and the fruit is poison. And I'm getting a little too much, Grant. I'm sorry. But I'm really disappointed at the immune system of the United States not rejecting this like the disease that it is. And to see someone like Jo Jorgensen do what she did, even though I totally agreed, Zig, that it was probably like clever to do so. But we don't need clever. We need brave. Clever will not save us in a time like this. Clever is for when everything's going good and you're like getting a bigger piece than you had before. That's when you need clever. When things are bad, like they are now, like they're not like the worst. It's not quite the Civil War. It's not even quite the Civil Rights era where there were bombs going off in New York every other week. It's not quite that bad, but it's not good. And the road that we seem to be heading down seems to be not good. And I'm worried by that because I want to have like kids. Like I want to grow old one day. And I don't want to have to worry about some weird ethnocentric nationalist group or even other ethnocentric nationalist groups arising in response to this ethnocentric nationalist group. I don't want that to be part of the American ethos. I don't want that to be part of our immune system, our body, a body politic. I think that we need to reject such things on their face and not even look for the merits. There are no merits to an ethnocentrist nationalist thinking. There's no merits to that. And we've only seen it destroy the culture that it represents and then to go out and destroy other cultures too, with no building involved. And it's way easier to destroy than it is to build.
Yeah, but the issue again is a centralized media that forces us to have conversations about things that don't matter. Okay. And instead of talking about fake news, people should think thoughtfully about centralized media. Okay, it's like a tweet comes out from the president, and now everyone has to talk about this one topic, whether or not it's useful or germane or pertinent to them. They now have to talk about this one topic. One of the biggest problems we have that people don't think about is a centralized media. It's a centralized media that looks like it's decentralized because you have the choice of Facebook or Twitter, which are more or less the same thing. You have a choice between Fox News and CNN and MSNBC, and they're all the same thing. They all operate to some extent out of Washington, D.C. Okay? People ought to be concerned about Washington, D.C. always telling us what to do in the media and making it look like they're not. That is happening.
It is a good point, man. The both of y'all are making. I mean, as we're in the program here, I want to bring up one final headline to top this all out with. And yeah, I think the general idea is that like in times like this, man, where stuff gets controversial, when stuff gets rocky and stuff gets so volatile, and we're vacillating between truth and non-truth, left and right. I mean, if you've spent a lot of your time, a lot of your life boiling down your worldview to easily sort of digestible truths or something like that makes sense to you and should make sense to everybody. If they're objective on their face, man, then I would say right now, I would implore you to hang on to those. Now more than ever, I would implore you to hang on to those.
And exactly what Zig is talking about. Hayek talking about in times of volatility, man, a decentralization of decision making, a decentralization of power, a decentralization of media coverage is usually, if not always, the proper antidote. It is the thing that will calm it down, that will quell the rising, that will quell the tide. It will calm it all down, man. It's not just because it's more relatable, dude. It's for so many other reasons, a decentralization of all this stuff. Shine's exactly right when he's like, look, man, if you had truth before, just rely upon that truth. If there is going to be something that's offensive, you yourself cannot be offensive. Let the truth itself be offensive. Because again, one more time, man, my biggest concern with everything we brought up today, and I think we're all on the same page with at least this part of it, my biggest concern with all this stuff, man, is that, like, you know, now some argument has interjected itself, squeezed itself like a splinter in there, like a splinter cell almost in there to just sort of like divide and squeeze out the rest. Well, we should be talking about other things. And it's the ability of whatever forces or powers at play to commandeer good movements, with noble intentions of people finally coming on the same page, man. That's why I was telling that story about law school, man, a while back. I was telling that story just to say that, like, I convinced myself through years and years of studying this stuff, man, that, like, there's major constitutional violations that are going on, and there needs to be barriers removed so people can live their best life. So people can live their best life, and so we can solve generational problems. Most of this stuff for me, my entire trajectory of everything that I feel like I'm doing is good. So, like, my entire trajectory is coupled with starting working in children's ministry, understanding how important the family is to everything, man. Give me a problem. It's usually sourced in the family. If you break apart the family, give me a societal problem, an economic problem, a political problem. It doesn't necessarily matter. Most of it usually, give me an education problem. I can tell you all kinds of data and statistics to back up the idea that it doesn't matter how much money you throw at the education system. The sole core of that problem usually is what's happening in the family unit. So I started in children's ministry and understood how important the family unit is. And then I went up to law school, understood that the criminal justice system does a lot, not necessarily designed, like Zig is talking about. There's no intention to break apart the family unit, but that's exactly what ends up happening a lot of the times. And then you have this terrible perpetual cycle that just drives downward and downwards and downwards. And all that stuff, all that trajectory that I feel like this is why I'm so biased on this. Why I get so charged up at a person, man, because I feel like I've devoted a lot of, like, man, we were just on the precipice of, like, oh, cool, dude, like everything I've been studying and putting my life into, and maybe we can solve some of this stuff and couple it back with. Now we're distracted. And see, Shine brings up a good point. The distraction itself then ends up becoming an exceedingly important topic to discuss, because it's also something that's been bubbling under the surface for a very long time. It should be no surprise right now that we're getting what we're getting currently, because the most read text on college campuses for about the past 5 to 10 years has been the Communist Manifesto. Should be no surprise at all. So see, that's what's frustrating here, man. It's like it's both are almost as important as the other. And here's the headline I want to end with here. So while everybody's talking about, yada, yada, whatever, we have some coin shortage going on. People are not taking cash anymore. They're claiming it's obviously because, they want to spread COVID or whatever. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. I do know that this headline right here from the Epoch or Epic Times, indicating that the U.S. budget deficit just hit an all-time high of $864 billion in June. But that doesn't tell the whole story. Here's the whole story. For the first 9 months of the budget year, which began on October 1st, the deficit totals $2.74 trillion. You heard that correctly, by the way. 9 months. 9 months of this year, the deficit is totaled $2.74 trillion. Now, yes, we've had bailouts and all this other stuff that we've needed to do. Also a record for that period. The country, this puts the country well on the way to hitting a $3.7 trillion deficit for the entire year. A $3.7 trillion deficit in 1 year, man. The next closest record to that was $1.4 trillion set in 2009. Like, I'm just telling you, dude, like, there's other stuff going on as well. And I kind of want to end the program by just kicking it to Zig one last time, and maybe Sean as well. The question that I always ask when any of this stuff comes up, dude. Zig, in all sincerity, buddy, do you think anyone, and I know I'm not joking when I say this, please understand me. Do you think anybody, an elected official or even other individuals or economists, is anybody actually concerned about this deficit anymore? I mean, in a serious way, is anybody actually concerned, or should I just stop worrying about it altogether? You know what I'm saying?
Well, no, I think people are right to worry about it, but what people have to do is understand the structural problems that allow for a deficit to happen. There are a number of structural problems in Congress itself, whether it be something like allowing the creation of omnibus packages, which pile in a bunch of pork, and because there's so much pork for so many different people's constituents, no one can vote against it, to problems with term limits for people being in committees. I want to say committee heads. There are various structural problems in Congress that let this happen. It's not just a matter of congressional people being lazy. There's structural problems in Congress, and perhaps at some point, maybe we can go over some of them.
Well, with that being said, I will actually end the program. By the way, just a quick pull in the veil back here. For probably about the past 5 to 10 minutes, I've been driving Shine insane. There's this cue that I try and give him sometimes when I mention terminology of like, we're about to end the show or stuff's about to end. He'll pull up the fade out music. And from time to time, I'll do that and just not in the program. So there's usually music going on behind the scenes. Anyway, so sorry, buddy. But that's been going on as we actually end the program this time. My name is Mr. Henry Zig up there in PA Way. Love what you're doing up there, man. David Shine Thompson signing off for everybody this morning. We'll be back tomorrow doing it big. Now, quick note here, too. Shine will not be with us tomorrow. He's got some work stuff going on. So tomorrow's program might look a little bit different. I'll be running it solo over here. So the production quality is going to be down tomorrow, just so y'all know. Hey, man, it is what it is. Love all y'all, for real, sincerely. Signing off until next time. See you then.